So maybe first I will start like why I took this topic, and it was simple. It's, I don't know, 2 months ago there was a new survey, like there is a JSS one and there is one about CSS, and now there is new one about HTML, like yearly survey. And because there are some new features, so they started it, and I went through the survey and answered what I knew, and I knew like 20 out of 45 questions I was able to answer that I know how to use the feature. In 20, I knew that it exists, but didn't know exactly what it does. And in 5 of those, I had no idea that those exist. So actually, I knew how to use less than 50% of those features. Then I finished, and it gives you score, like in percentile, how many people are better than you in the result. And I was very surprised that with my like poor result, there was 0 people better than me in knowing what those new features mean, so, and how to use them. So that's why I choose the topic. So despite my previous presentations where I talked about how to make more performant JavaScript and so on, there is no JavaScript at all. The presentation itself is actually a web page, so I can show directly those new features like in live presentation. Hopefully it will work in this browser as well, because I need to switch computer. And here are all the features I will present. First, we will get to like why those features are actually better, because we can do most of these things in JavaScript somehow. But the HTML and some related CSS is way better in accessibility, because you don't need to think about like control of your web by keyboard, some state where the user maybe during some animation click something, but it should be disabled in the running animation and so on. And HTML new features simply take care about all of this, so you don't need to use area tags like area label or area expanded and this stuff which we so much hate, I guess, all of us. Maybe not, but I do. I can write it, but I don't like it. It's some extra work, and with those features you can skip a lot of those. Also, it's standard. There is documentation to like minor details. It's hardware accelerated way faster than even when you use workers. It's easy to switch framework. Doesn't matter, you write it your app in framework X and then go to React and then to Angular and then to Vue. Like the functionality of HTML and CSS is still the same. So it's super easy to refactor. And also when you use some more complex like observation interceptors and stuff like that, you need to clean your event listeners afterward. You don't need to do anything with HTML. You don't care about how it's solved behind the door. So let's go and check the first feature. It's new attribute in HTML called Inert. It can be applied to every single or any element in your page. And when I now press tab, I will go to a link. Then I go another tab and I go to link number 2. In between, there is a input, but it's skipped. I cannot click it. I cannot reach it with my keyboard. It's simply like it's not there for interaction. So we used to be able to do the same with pointer events none, but it's only applied to like mouse, pens, touch and stuff like that, but you always could reach it by keyboard, and then you had to use JavaScript to like this. If you press tab, then this element should be skipped by some additional event listener. Easy with this, just label block with inert and you are done. It's smart, it's accessible, you don't need to do anything more, so you can skip a lot of JavaScript in your app. Other thing, it's a bit older, I still put it here because it's kind of like nice feature. It's this like position we have absolute, relative, and some other fixed. We have also sticky, and in some container which can scroll, you use another element with position sticky, and what it does, that as you scroll through it, until it's reached, it knows that it should be button 0 or top 0, depending where is it related in the box. And as long as it's like below default, it's at the bottom 0. If I say button 20, then it will just flow 20 pixels over the border all the time. When I reach it, then it's like part of the regular flow. And as this has top 0 as well, it's again stick at the top. So like this is like meaningless example of how it can be used. But you can also use it where the scroll container is actually not the one inside which the stick is. So this is maybe way more real app scenario where you have this sticky advertisement as always on the side, and as you scroll down, it's still there until you reach the button. It's just disappear with the flow. There is another sticky at the bottom. It uses special trick where the sticky footer has z index -1, so it's actually still at the bottom, like even now, but you don't see it because it's below the other elements. And when I reach it here, then it's magically appear. Again, like nice feature to be implemented. I remember this took like days or weeks to implement because it was extremely difficult to tackle all the like edge cases in browsers and how to avoid this behavior on mobile because you don't want it there and so on. This is like super easy. You can use media queries to enable, disable, whatever. One thing about the whole presentation, like I'm not trying to teach you exactly how to use every single property in CSS and every single attribute. It's more like overview what can be done, because as I told you in the beginning, like there is a lot of people who have no idea that those things even exist, and then they can be quite useful. Another feature, also not like the total brand new, but quite nice, is this scroll snapping, when you have again like some scrollable container and inside there are some elements. When I scroll down, I can scroll, and when it has some like velocity, I scroll a little bit and it scrolls somehow and stop. What the stickiness or this like snapping does, that it always end up in like some selected area. So each of those blocks has this like scroll snap align, and I can tell whether it's like start, button, or center. And I can also say whether it's like mandatory to always align to this element, or whether it's proximity, which means that if I'm in the middle, it doesn't go anywhere. But when I go a bit higher, then the browser say, okay, I'm near to the edge, let's like align. It's like super nice that it works with the velocity, and it always like smooths the things even. It actually, in the beginning, before you or when you start scrolling, it already knows where it will end up and adjusts the animation to be like super smooth. The third property which you can use with this is like scroll always. Before we saw that when I dragged a little, it went somewhere and stopped there based on the velocity. Now I say that every other element by like the end child, like every second element has this always, the others don't. And so it always can goes to the every other element and skip the, like, you can skip some, but you always end on some specific element. And I see that it doesn't work well with the proximity. So this need to be mandatory. And when I scroll, it's always, I'm not really used to this. You can see it's like every other where it stops when I try hard to scroll over. Yet another feature, which is this like super nice for making like awesome websites easy, this like wow effect. It can be used for this all kinds of parallax things, which used to be quite difficult with JavaScript to handle correctly. And now you can handle all of this with CSS. So let's check this scroll-driven animation. And there are several types. There is one which you can see that you have like regular animation, and normally with the animation you says like how long it take. Now we skip that 1 second, 2 seconds, whatever, because the time is not the driver in behind, like what drive the animation from start to end. What it's driven by is this like scroll. So it says that the nearest scrollable element will drive the animation, and when I'm at the top, it's the animation, it's s.0. When I'm at the bottom, it's like at the end. And I use this like div at the top, which is again sticky, and progress as I read, like doesn't really make sense. For this case, again, maybe on mobile where you don't see the scroll bar, so you can have it as indicator of like reading through some article, for instance. There is another type of these animations, or how we measure where the animation starts and ends. And instead of using timeline scroll, we can use timeline view. And that's similar to what JavaScript uses in the intersection observers, where I define that the view is actually my screen, and I don't care what's above, I don't care what's below, but I say that when the element, like in this case image, entered the screen, and I say that the range of the animation is the entry point. So the starting point is when it entered, and the end of animation when it's like stop entering. You can also use range exit. You can use custom ranges defined by some like 20 pixels and so on from the beginning, like from top, from bottom, and so on. There is also different syntax which can be applied to the same to do maybe it's somehow different or recycle this animation drivers. So you don't need to write it for every single element again. You can share them across. It's actually used in another example, or maybe one thing which is nice to see here. There are also some like minus 10%, and this image like is blurry in the beginning and like sharpen as it's slide in. But because the blurry make actually the element visible even before enter the edge. Like if I don't use the minus 10%, which says that the animation starts like 10% lower than my end of the screen, then it would be now I would see like white at the bottom, and as I screen the image by the edge to the screen, then it's like blink and it would be disturbing. So I can use this special syntax to start even earlier than the page begins. Another fancy animation like this was like super easy. It can be of course used for something else than make unblur images. They can slide from sides or rotate to the screen, whatever you want. Here is example of again like purely CSS HTML driven stuff where you can like scroll through. It's always stop because it's used the scroll snapping, so it always stop at the image. Maybe you know this kind of slider from the old Macs. Now I guess the feature is removed, but it used to be there. It can be all driven by the animation. Again, like the entry point is when the first image slide in the page, and when it disappears, it's like stop animating. The nice thing about most of those features is when the browser doesn't support it yet, then what you would see is just regular slider with square images sliding from one side to another without this like fancy animation and highlighting and scaling up and so on. So all CSS, nothing else. Now, these were more like CSS-driven things. Now we are more to some HTML attributes. We have this new attribute on HTML, which is called Popover. It can be either auto or manual. Auto is the default one, and it says that if it's auto, what it actually does is that it's open some kind of dialog. And if it's auto, I can click anywhere outside the element which is open and it's closed. When it's manual, then it's not the thing. I now clicked another button and I opened another dialog. So you can have multiple popovers. And the relation between the popover is that you say this will be opened. You have popover target, which just aim to some ID. To be honest, I hate those like relations by ID, because then you need to handle the uniqueness of the IDs, and you probably still need some JavaScript to give every single component some special like suffix with 1, 2, 3 to handle this. You can also animate the backdrop there. It's like new feature, which we can see when we inspect. There is something called top layer. It's another new feature coming with a lot of those new stuff. And it's there because you don't want to handle that index. Probably the popover or dialog or whatever should be always at the top, and you don't want to give it that index 99,099,099 and so on, or maybe multiply it by 10 if it doesn't work. So now it works always. It's always at the top. Doesn't matter what are the z indexes used in your app. So it can like replace a lot of, again, JavaScript, this like toggles, which we know from everywhere. So now we don't need JS for it. Another feature, because now you will see this popover is always positioned. I gave it like margin button 10, but normally it has margin auto and it's just in the middle of the screen, which is not what you always want. So there is another new feature which makes the popover even more amazing, and that's anchor. And this is that you have these things what I call here anchor. I give it anchor name, and then use something what looks like definition of CSS variable, but it's not CSS variable, but it must have those two dashes. So it's just to make it more confusing, right? We know it from CSS, it's always confusing, and that's how we want it. So that's why they gave it there. And so this is just your name, and you refer in the info box, which is the element on the right, that it actually relates to anchor with this name, and top of the info box will be aligned with top of the anchor, left of the info box will be aligned with the right of the anchor. So this is way how you can relate things together. And again, like this doesn't really look that useful on its own, like as I have it. It can do one actually nice feature. If you have anchor 1 and anchor 2, which is like here and there, and then you can position the things like in the middle as it relates to both of the anchors, which can be interesting. I haven't found the real usage for it. What's also interesting here, there is one more thing, is this like position try, what again make anchors even better and more awesome. And is that when it doesn't fit to the screen, then I can define some fallback solution. If it doesn't, the popover doesn't fit to the screen, I can say, okay, it will be below. So let's see some more like real world scenario. We have this menu. It uses the anchors and popovers, and I can use tab, space, tab, go back, and so on, and close it all by keyboard. So it's like I don't need any like management of things. It always, when I now space this, then the new things in new layer is actually the active where the tab goes. So that's all nice. I can also show you like what happened with this like fallbacks. Like here the fallback is applied. So again, something what either you had to manually solve with your JavaScript, or there were like libraries, this like popover positioners, or I don't know, there are plenty of those, and you don't need them anymore. You can actually, this one is animated, you can even like define more fallbacks. So first is default right, fallback left, and if there is no space on the left, then it's button, and I can even animate the fallback. So if you have this like picky developers which always play with resizing, you know, people normally doesn't do it, but for us, it's there. So, and what's the focus group mentioned here? It was one of those answered in the survey, and I checked like, what the hell, I haven't never heard it, and they ask me whether I use it. So I checked. I found out it's not implemented in a single browser. The requirement is actually not closed, so we even doesn't know how exactly it will work. And they asked me whether I use it, so I said no. So they know I was not cheating. And what does the focus group do? Like the things from the accessibility point of view is that sometime you should in complex menus enable arrows, toggles, like don't using tabs. By tab you goes to the menu, and then you should go through arrows left, right, top button, and home to go to like first or last element and so on. The focus group is something which you simply put focus group on, I don't know, this box. And then this box, you say it's either horizontal or vertical. And when it's vertical, then you can use up and down arrows. And when you click home, it goes to the first one at the top and so on. So once that is implemented, you will be able to cover all these like complex menus with HTML, CSS, with 100% accessibility without needing JavaScript at all. And it's actually even better. We were used that a lot of those patterns were handled by like going here, hovering, then on the hover it opened. You need to cross this little bridge here so you don't close the submenu again. And then like probably you all know it, so it's like nasty. It was the only solution with pure CSS before. Now you can skip it. Now something harder to grasp. It's transition behaviors. And you can do animation in CSS by two major ways. Either you use transitions, so which mean that some element has some, I don't know, position top 0, and when you apply some other class and you simply change the CSS by changing the selector, or like you add class to it, or I don't know, you on hover, whatever, you will overwrite it from top 0 to top 20, and you say, okay, I want to animate it. So we will say transition all, as we all do, because it's too difficult to say transition property and then name exactly what can be done, but doesn't matter. And it will animate to the position. What it doesn't support, and it was pain for a lot of people, so they voted for this nice feature which says allow discrete, and it says that when you goes from something what has display none and display block or whatever visible, you can also animate it, like how you can animate if it's there or not there. But the thing is that it's actually there for all the time of the transition, and then will it disappear. So you have the time for doing for the rest of the properties the real animation. So here you can see toggle cards. I toggle. The one of the left has this, like when I'm disappearing it, it will stay there because the display none will actually took 2 seconds until it take a place. It can be also done in vice versa, like when it's appearing, but in this case it doesn't work here, not because this would not take a place and allow discrete. It's more about the selectors, how they are, like what's the priority of the selectors, and because the things before was not in the screen, it was displayed none. So when I say now it is in, it doesn't have any previous opacity. So it just starts with the default one, and it's 1. There is no animation. So that's not nice. And that's why there is another feature to fix it, but we will come to later. Now there is a dialog. It's very similar to the anchor thing, but it has some additional features. Like when you can open the dialog in 2 ways. Now I did, and it appeared somewhere here. So it's broken. It's not, it still appeared. There is no JavaScript, or there is actually in this case you need to call this show function on the dialog, and the dialog is opened, but you can still do whatever else on the screen, clicking on the stuff, and so it's not blocking anything. You can also have the open show model. In this case, it's always appear in the middle of the screen, and the advantage is that it's auto-applied this inert attribute to the background. So now if I press tab, I go to DevTools and not to the screen itself, like nothing in behind. So I don't need to disable any like add tab index -1 to every single element in background by JavaScript and these nasty things which used to be needed before. I can also, when I show the model, you can see I will appear the background, this like backdrop is animated, but when I try to close it, I can animate the dialog itself because it will for a millisecond disappear, but I say that when it's fade out, and after the millisecond, I again display it to block, so it appear again and then start scaling to 0, and it's not there. Unfortunately, the backdrop itself, in the 1 millisecond, simply disappear from the DOM, so I cannot animate it, even if I appear the dialog again. Sorry? Nasty dialogues, I haven't. Like, you can have multiple regular dialogues in the non-model version. I don't know whether you can nest one to each other. I would say no, because again, like you can have multiple of those on a screen in different places. And actually, you see there is no top layer, so they are simply appear in the HTML at the same position as they were before. When I close it, open the model, you can see there is the top layer. So this is like, again, in the different layer of like different HTML. 5 minutes. Nice. And another things which, when I said that we cannot animate the fade out of the background, actually we can with yet another super nice feature, starting style, which says when the people was not in the DOM before and I just appear it, I can say that this is what doesn't work as an animation, but I can just say that when it appear in the DOM, let's pretend it was there before and it has opacity 0. And then at like, now I want opacity 1, but because there is transition for 1 second, when I open it with the animation, it will pop out, it will disappear again. So I can keep those things in the screen with the starting style. The like best feature, I would say, is the view transitions. Like, it's like mind-blowing for sure. And it means that you can actually now interact between pages and animate to different pages. So when I click this, it takes a while, and then you can see how the back animation is like. Here it's just appear like from small to big. What's quite interesting, when I am able to F11, like this is test.html, this is view transitions single page up. So these are totally different pages, and you can animate from one page to another. You just need to say, like, define on both pages this behavior with view transition, and you need to name some name like h1 view, it can be whatever. And in the other page, you need to name another or like similar element or some other element with the same, and it will then automatically transition from another. What I show here in the backward animation, one of those images from one screen is like rotating and shrinking. And it's like cross-animate those two. So you need to define the animation in both pages. What happened with this current page element and how it disappeared, and what happened in the new, with what's the animation. So here I play one of the animation forward and the other backward. And at the end, it means that those things like rotates in different directions and end up in the same place. The default behavior is that it's just move and rescale, but you can apply some additional animations and says that one will disappear one way and from the other side it will come again as, I don't know, bigger or whatever. Then the most jaw-dropping thing which we were begging for last 25 years, and it's animating or transitioning between height 0 and height auto. It was not possible. There was like plenty hacks in JavaScript how to do that, to display all the content, measure the size, hide the content again, then animate it. You don't need to do it now. You just say interpolate size, allow keywords. So that means that when there is auto, the CSS automatically converts it to how much the auto auto is pixels and then do the animation for you. It goes even more amazing because you have new, not calc, but calc size, where you can say that I care about this auto height. So just get what's the auto, and then now it gives me the result, what's the size in pixels, and you can extra apply some mathematics on it and say it's actually 2 times the height and plus some theorems in this case. And I use this like super WebKit box reflect feature, which doesn't work anywhere else, just to make it more awesome. So you have the reflection like in water. Here is the support, like all of those which have the check mark are actually has polyfills, so you can use it now with polyfill, but beware if you want to use plenty of those features all at once, and it's like it's 100 animations flying in the page. It's all what's done in the background is that it's need to take every single line of your CSS, check like this is something that it doesn't work, remove it, add JavaScript to replace it, and then it's like super slow because it needs this intersection observers and stuff like that. Here are like % how it's covered by the browsers nowadays and what are the browsers which implement it. So that's basically it. And there is just one last thing which I do after my time, which is just to make it like more memorable. And this is just combination of all those things in some like fancy product, which doesn't use any JavaScript at all. I scroll down the picture on the timeline, change a color bit to be nicer. The title scroll to the top left. There are images coming which slide in with some animation. They always stick at the top of the screen until there is like a new set of the pictures, which is announced, the pictures slide out and new set starts stacking on top, and there is no single line of JavaScript doing all of this. So that's it. Thank you. Use HTML over JavaScript if possible.